After another day of uncertainty on the money markets, the financial regulator has again moved to reassure Irish investors and bank customers. Patrick Neary says people should continue to transact with their banks as normal. The uncertainty has resulted in customers shifting deposits between banks and financial institutions. Tonight, Mr Neary reiterated that Irish banks are resilient and well capitalised. Central banks around the world today pumped nearly $200 billion into the international financial system in an attempt to calm nerves on global markets.
Irish banks have been really busy in the last few days, dealing with queries about the safety of customer deposits. It appears that customers have woken up to the fact that the maximum deposit guaranteed in a bank is still stuck at the EU minimum set in the early 1990s of €20,000. That's enough to cover 90% of all of the deposit accounts in Ireland, so there should be little fear. Tonight, the financial regulator moved to reassure the public that their deposits are safe.
Georgia, we can understand why people are nervous in light of what's been happening in the United States. But the situation in Ireland is different. Irish banks have access to the European Central Bank for liquidity. And in fact, before this turmoil started at all, we were working with the banks to build up their liquidity reserves. And this has stood them in very good stead since the turmoil began.
The regulator said that Irish banks are resilient and well capitalised.
People should continue to transact with their banks as normal, and people can have full confidence that their deposits with Irish financial institutions are safe.
However, account holders with large deposits are still swapping some of their money between banks to maximise their guarantees. Foreign-owned banks with higher guarantee thresholds have been doing well out of this.
The numbers of calls coming into our customer care centre was threefold in the average of a day, and also the number of new customer registrations went up with 300%.
Savers who are desperately seeking other safe havens for their money are also turning to gold. Gold Investment in Dublin say their business is well up and their new customers are as diverse as company directors, housewives and students.
Well, it's been probably the busiest day we've ever actually had. Our call volume is up about 400% on any normal day, so our phones have been going off the hook all day long.
Meanwhile, the financial markets remained very volatile, especially in Dublin, where share prices were down by more than 2.5% and the value of most bank shares continued to fall. George Lee, RTE News.
In New York, the investment bank Morgan Stanley could be the next to succumb. Its share price tumbled today and it's in advanced merger talks with American retail bank Wachovia. If it goes, it'll leave Goldman Sachs as the last of the independent investment banks on Wall Street. As confidence continued to ebb away, the US Federal Reserve and other central banks agreed to a massive injection of cash to stop the global financial system grinding to a halt.
Last night, the Federal Reserve, in coordination with central banks around the world, took a substantial step to provide additional liquidity to the U.S. financial system. These actions are necessary and they're important, and the markets are adjusting to them.
What is happening in New York and here in the City of London has global implications. That is why the Bank of England here, in conjunction with the US Federal Reserve, last night pumped $180 billion into the money markets. The European Central Bank acted similarly in an attempt to stem this crisis. And it's not over yet. In London, the FTSE closed slightly down. Nerves calmed a little by that cash injection and by the takeover of HBOS by Lloyds TSB. Thousands of job losses at the combined banks are likely in Britain, but unlikely in Ireland, where HBOS employs 1,700 people. However, there's no guarantee the new UK superbank won't take a fresh look at its Irish operation at some point in the future. HBOS and Morgan Stanley have been victims of short selling. That's investors betting on shares falling. It's not illegal, but tonight Britain's city watchdog, the FSA, has banned short selling of financial stock. Brian O'Connell, RTE News in the City of London.
And George joins me now in studio. George, we've seen increasing nervousness here at home. The words of the financial regulator tonight enough to calm those nerves?
I think his words are important because, again, they're coming out and they're driving home the fact that as far as they're concerned, they're working very closely with all the banks. They've built up the capital bases of these banks. They're talking about how resourceful the European Central Bank can be if there were any difficulties, and they're saying that there are none and that people should remain calm. What people clearly are, they will be impressed the fact that they're coming out and stating rating that. But the other thing is that people are obviously very concerned about the level of guarantee, because they've seen the likes of AIG, Go Wallop and Lehman Brothers, and the guarantee in Ireland in terms of the deposits is at a European minimum. Now, it's at the European minimum in 9 countries, but it is being looked at across Europe with a view to a report coming out at the end of this year, and they would improve it. I think under those circumstances it seems that people at the Department of Finance are examining this very carefully. They're observing the likes of people moving their deposit to foreign-owned banks. I'm sure that there is no need for that, and we are likely to see some kind of announcement very soon in relation to the level of guarantee. I think they're considering whether or not they will be raising that, and raising it very soon, not by waiting until the end of the year. After all, they're bringing the budget forward in response to a crisis. Why would they not bring something like that forward in response to a crisis? That will help. So the combination of the authorities coming out and saying how convinced they are that things are okay with an improvement in the guarantee will help. But we haven't got the improvement in the guarantee yet, but people should begin to expect something relatively soon.
And globally, George, today we saw that massive coordinated intervention by central banks, and nonetheless the uncertainties remain.
They do, because we've seen the likes of what has happened. The failures are very significant, and the people who deal with those banks would have lost money, so other institutions are clearly in trouble. The liquidity that was put in to help the money markets to begin to function right, and that's the #1 target. And it's a positive thing for the stock markets, but it isn't a silver bullet for the stock markets. We really have to see these banks trade their way out of this difficulty, and while the uncertainties prevail about which assets are worth any money and which institution is exposed to them, the nervousness will continue. But the authorities all over the place are clearly getting their act together. They're working with each other to make sure that this thing is seen off, but it'll be a bit of a battle yet.
George, many thanks.